What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick and Taylor Kyles here with another episode of Pat's Daily presented by PrizePicks and Game Time. We are back to preview the Patriots' third open OTA of the offseason. Me and Taylor will be down in Foxborough tomorrow, Tuesday, to get yet another look at the new look New England Patriots. So, Taylor, before we get started, a very important question. How the heck are you doing today? How was your weekend? I feel like we did the same exact show, just a week ago today, but how are we doing? You ready for another OTA down in Foxborough this week?
Yes, sir. I'm good, buddy. Enjoyed the nice weather that we actually got. Got to be outside, soak up a little sun. We're going to get to soak up some more sun, hopefully, at practice, because those days be hot down there on the field. But I'm excited, man. Yeah, it is kind of repetitive because OTAs, there's not a whole lot that happens in terms of like any change. But, it's important to at least address before we get into these practices what kind of things we're looking for so people understand what to expect from us after practice. And also just kind of the storylines heading in, because we did get a little bit of change from the last time. So we're going to be hitting on a lot of the same topics, but with, a little extra context based on what we saw during last week's session.
A killer sunburn for myself last week. I have to make sure I put the sunblock on the forehead. I didn't wear a hat. It was bad. I got in the shower and I got home and I felt like I was burning my face off. So
for that extra protection, the old Tommy Curran.
Yeah, I might have to rock that. We're learning. We're getting used to it. We're back in the swing of things. But you're right too, because it does get a little repetitive because there are, many storylines, but they're all kind of the same, and you don't get a ton of change practice to practice. But we were still able to sort of, dig a couple things out here and see sort of what changes we're looking at this week compared to last week. In the first, again, it's Drake Maye and it's the quarterbacks. But it's a little bit different of a lens to look at from last week, because, last week we talked about what kind of reps is Drake Maye going to get? Is he going to be not shut out by, but, still behind Bailey Zappe? And is Joe Milton going to continue to sort of leak in there? And Joe Milton wasn't there. And Drake Maye looked really good. I mean, as far as, we talked about it here on Press Pass on our stand-ups down in Foxborough, but we saw the no-look pass and we saw the short game was really solid. The footwork continues to, look slow but improved. And so I'm curious what you think about the quarterback reps, but also kind of just, what's next for Drake Maye in this development? What more can we see this week compared to last? And do you think he deserves to jump Bailey Zappe in that rotation and really sort of get those quote unquote second team, second reps?
First, when it comes to Drake's mechanics, I've gotten to the point where I'm not going to really, if it's bad, I'll address it. If there's something that's really glaringly wrong. But man, I'm not really a quarterback guru. On film, it's a little bit easier to see when the results and you can kind of tie it into being okay, this pass sprayed, what happened? Sometimes that can be helpful. But when it comes to practices, we don't know what he's being told to do. We don't know if he's being told, be more deliberate. The whole stuff with his release, if you want to really see a long release, look at Trevor Lawrence, man. It's just some of these longer quarterbacks physically take longer to get the ball out. I know I talked about that with Derek Klassen before Drake was taken. We went through all the quarterbacks in the film session, and I asked him, is there anything that you can fix? And there are certain things where Drake will have the ball dip sometimes, and those are things I know he's aware of. But for the most part, man, I'm so sick of hearing people talk about, his mechanics look so much better and all. It's most of us don't know. We have no idea. So truly, unless you are a coach, I don't want to hear it at this point. I'm so done with that. So as long as the results are where they need to be, I don't really care how it looks. That's for Alex Van Pelt to decide. But like you said, in terms of what we saw on the field, I thought it did look good. Like you mentioned, the short game, he had the really nice connection downfield to Tyquan Thornton, and that's notable. But for me, I know he can do that stuff. The downfield accuracy, I know that's what you're looking for in Drake Maye. I wanted to see the short stuff, and I was really encouraged by not just the accuracy, where we were seeing throw after throw. Some of these guys were blanketed, and he's throwing it far out so that his guys can be the only ones to get it, or at least so that, it's not behind, which is what you saw a lot in college. In the short game, he was putting passes on the back hip of his receivers, and in the NFL, those turn into incompletions or just way tougher grabs than they need to be. Even the first practice we saw in rookie minicamp, he acknowledged that Javon Baker and Jaylen had to make some tougher catches because he wasn't putting the ball in the right spots. So that progression I really liked. The intelligence, which I've been talking about for months, is something I think he really doesn't get enough credit for. The ability to, especially in the quick game, make these split-second decisions where you are pumping someone open or a pressure comes in and throwing it out, which sounded like, based on Jacoby Brissett's response where he gave him a dap, that was something he had improved from an earlier practice. So these things that you really can see his IQ live and in person is really exciting. I do think, obviously, he deserves more reps than Bailey Zappe. I also think we saw that with Joe Milton out, it felt like he really did get a chance to string good plays together, or plays, period, together. You'd have Jacoby Brissett having his sessions, but it felt like he was getting like a handful of throws. Then May, it felt like was getting a few more than that, especially when they split up and it was really just kind of Zappe on one field by himself with really the projected backup. So, of course, I think he deserves more reps, especially if he continues to improve and it gets to the point where you're saying, okay, he's starting to push and he's looking as good, if not better, than Jacoby at some points. Jacoby still looks far and away the most consistent, and he should be the projected starter, and it shouldn't be close right now. But at the same time, if Drake continues to look better and better and his talent starts to take over because his mind is slowing down, then it gets to the point where it's like he's going to make rookie mistakes. You still want him to get live reps so that he can learn from them, because this is a mentally tough guy. But I hope he is doing the things behind the scene where he can continue to push to make it more comfortable for him to be that number 2 and maybe the number 1. But also I understand if right now they want these young guys in OTAs to earn their reps, while you do see guys like, Juju and Zappe, who probably aren't in the long-term plans, really getting more of those number 2 reps just because, it's OTAs, there's competition, but you're really more learning and you want things to stay in rhythm. And those guys kind of help with that. But again, if Drake keeps playing well, I don't really think there's a reason to be giving Zappe valuable reps with the guys who are actually going to be on the field.
Right. And you mentioned the, him saying that he was throwing, passes behind guys like Jaylen Polk and Javon Baker. That's just repetition. And that's just getting used to, how these guys run routes, how they like to sort of read coverage versus how you like to read coverage and where you like to put the football. And so that's just going to come with repetition, which we saw last.
And new footwork as well. That's something he also mentioned. Yeah.
Yep. And no, that too. But we saw last Wednesday, the last 3 offensive players off the field were Drake Maye, Jaylen Polk, and Javon Baker. Like they're trying to get these in. They want to get comfortable with each other. And you see it translate to the field already. And I forget who they were. I don't know if it was one of those 2 guys, but you mentioned throwing guys open. Like there were 2 or 3 dig routes where he is just putting it where only that receiver can get it, even in good coverage with the defender. Drake Maye is just throwing guys open. So the talent, the intangible, strong arm, putting it where it wants to go, all that stuff's there. It's going to just become a matter of, putting it all together with the footwork, with the playbook and things like that. But I like what you said about, Jacoby's going to be the starter, at least to start the season. We all think he seems more comfortable. It makes a ton of sense. But man, if and I know it was just one practice that we really got excited about, but if Drake Maye can kind of string this together, I don't see why you have to sit him that long. Right. And I know, and I look at a guy like Justin Herbert in LA, who I've sort of comped Drake Maye to him all along. Just the, big body, athletic, puts the ball where he wants to. Herbert was seen as a developmental guy in LA, and he was sitting behind Tyrod Taylor. And circumstances happened. Tyrod got stabbed in the lung or whatever would happen. And then all of a sudden, Justin Herbert goes in the first game. He almost beats the Chiefs. And he plays, and he was outstanding, and he set the rookie record for touchdown passes, what have you. The same thing could happen with Drake Maye. Now, are the Patriots as talented as that Chargers team was? Not exactly, but it could turn into something like that. And I'm not saying Jacoby's going to get hurt, but I'm saying that type of player, when you have all those, you have the talent like those guys do, it can translate rather quickly. So we'll obviously have to wait and see what happens. I think they're in a good spot quarterback wise with what they have in Jacoby and Drake Maye. And I look at Maye too. He's so young, so there's not really a like I look at Mac Jones last year, right? And he was so nervous, maybe is the right way to put it. He had these battle scars. He had these wounds where it's like he gets, things don't go his way and he gets nervous and jittery and he makes a stupid mistake and throws it away. And obviously we're not going to see that with Maye yet, but it's comforting to know that he is like a moldable piece of clay that doesn't have all that, excess baggage that we saw with Mac Jones last year. So I'll in general, very happy with the quarterback position so far. I want to add that, and you mentioned a little bit, or one of us said it, where Joe Milton wasn't there last week.
Yeah.
Does Joe Milton being at practice Tuesday, like, does that affect anything with May? Do you not affect in a bad way, but like, how do you think the reps get split up? Do you think that should be not so much cause for concern, but I guess how do you see it, or how should it go with 4 guys tomorrow instead of 3 from last week?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. And I was wondering the same thing, especially if Drake is making more progress and you're like, we really do want to get this guy reps. Again, I'm not anticipating that Drake is going to be the number 2. I still think it's going to be the veterans kind of getting the nod until we get into maybe mini camp and maybe even to the summer once we really get to training camp. And it's like, all right, now, pads are on. We're still in the install phase, but it's about heavier competition because it's a little higher paced.
Right.
Really don't know. I feel like you don't want to take it away from Drake Maye. I think if anything, it would be like what we saw last time, where it kind of more eats into Bailey Zappe's reps, where he was taking the majority of reps on that other field, and it felt more like it was Jacoby and Drake on the other, which is what we saw even when Joe Milton was there. It was Joe and Zappe, and then Jacoby and Drake. And also maybe it just means that Milton doesn't get as many reps as maybe we saw in that first practice where they were all together, where instead of, wasn't getting like 10, but maybe it's really just 3 or 4. That's going to be an interesting one to watch, again, because he missed time and maybe, Drake gained ground. And I don't know. It's weird. Bottom line, Joe Milton should not affect Drake Maye's reps, although I'm sure he'll be in the lineup. Yeah. Interesting one to see. It's tough to project, but I just don't think he's going to get many reps at all at the end of the day.
And I still think the way the room is set up right now makes sense. And there's so much pushback right now on why are there 4 quarterbacks and why is Bailey Zappe around? Like, we talked about it last week, but I just want to reiterate again, like the way the core plan is right now makes a ton of sense to me anyway. And I think it should to most people, with 4 guys, not 3. It's June 3rd. There's so much football left to play. You're not struggling for roster spots right now. I guess we'll touch on it when we get to the offensive line, but Andrew Stuber was waived this morning. So like, there's still 1 spot left. It's not like you're fiending to cut a quarterback. And I think Bailey Zappe knows his place. I think everybody in that room, knows what's kind of going on right now. And the quarterbacks, or the rookies, are last. The veterans are first because it's June. Brissett and Zappe get the 1s and 2s. Zappe's your quote-unquote backup. Drake Maye is the developmental guy. And Joe Milton's really the I guess, more of a developmental guy, but the late round pick who doesn't see a lot of reps, but is kind of around for the ride. It could be a camp arm. And so when the 4 of them are together, it's Brissett, then it's Zappe, who still gets those sort of backup reps with the veterans in case push comes to shove and Brissett gets hurt, what have you. And Zappe's the backup. And Drake Maye's the guy you're trying to get ready for your future. So he's 3rd, but they split up into those 2, the 2 fields that we keep seeing. It's Brissett, and then it's Maye, because he still needs to continue to develop under Jacoby and with the sort of Alex Van Pelt and those sort of, I guess, more prominent coaches, where on the other side, it's the developmental guys with Bailey Zappe, who's there as a backup and a camp arm, and Joe Milton, who's there in the same. So again, I don't think that there should be this rush to cut Bailey Zappe, and I don't think there should at all be a rush to cut Joe Milton, who's a 6th-round pick, who is really here to just, be an arm and get footballs out there, what have you. So I think they're in a good place right now, quarterback room wise. I think everybody understands their role. So there really doesn't have to be this outcry to get rid of Bailey Zappe.
Yeah, and I guess the one interesting thing is that Gerard Mayo did make it sound like he does want to cut it down to 3 quarterbacks, which I guess does make sense, especially if you're splitting reps with the top guys. Like even last year, they had Mac, they had Zappe, and then they had who was it at that time? It was Trace McSorley. So finding reps for 4 quarterbacks is difficult, especially when you have a young guy where Joe Milton, he is talented. You want to get him reps, but I think it all just is incumbent on how far along Drake Maye is in his growth. If it feels like he's making steady progress where he really does understand the offense, and you're more worried about, can he do it on the field consistently rather than like, oh, his head is swimming. There's so much, like, we just need a veteran who knows how to run an NFL offense. If Drake can pass that test, then I could see Bailey Zappe getting cut, just because Joe Milton does have a lot of talent and you'd like to see him get some opportunities. But also, if Joe Milton cannot physically operate an NFL offense, I mean, even still, we saw Trace McSorley. it wasn't really great either. Like anytime he came in, it was just like passes were, no offense, passes were flying everywhere. So it wasn't like, those third and fourth groups were getting great consistency either. But yeah, I think it'll maybe be a combination of Joe Milton, but really at the end of the day, is Drake someone where you're confident this really is a 2-quarterback race?
Right.
And if Jacoby were to get hurt and be your starter, you're not really worried about Drake Maye being thrust into a role.
Correct.
It's more just like, yeah, we'd rather have him, a slow entrance into the NFL. But, if push comes to shove, we'd rather him out there than Bailey Zappe because he gives us a better chance to win.
Yeah, I think that you hit it on the head. It's really going to depend on if they're comfortable throwing Drake Maye into a fire, if they really want to take this slowly and put him in the perfect position where it may be worth keeping Zappe around to be that backup in an emergency situation, and Drake Maye's inactive until they want to really, I guess, release him and throw him into the fire, what have you. So
that's it for the sign a veteran backup. I kind of keep forgetting that just because I'm so used to Bailey Zappe and being like, well, you have a guy who's won games in the NFL. It's not that crazy to keep him around, but at the same time, if you do feel maybe Drake isn't ready and we already cut Zappe. One, there's no promise that Zappe's going to get signed elsewhere, if we're being totally honest. And also, like I said, you can still usually find guys on the market if you really need a veteran. So just putting that out there as well.
Yeah. So that's the quarterbacks. We're going to get into the rest of the offense, interior offensive line, wide receivers, what have you. But first, let's listen to a quick message from our friends over at PrizePicks.
PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. The finals mean more on PrizePicks, and so do the star players. You get boosted payouts on select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. When the finals are over, the hoops action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball was just getting started. With young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese looking to make names for themselves alongside greats like Breonna Taylor and Asia Wilson, you could win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. This week on PrizePicks, I'm looking at the basketball board, and I'm taking Jaylen Brown's overs on points and rebounds because dude has been absolutely killing it. I'm also going to take Caitlin Clark for more than 3.5 3-pointers made and Breonna Stewart for more than 25 points. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
2 weeks ago, we saw Nick Leverett and Sidy Sow taking the majority of the reps on the interior at both left and right guard spots next to David Andrews. And last week, we saw it turn into Antonio Mafi and Michael Jordan. So Sidy Sow, I think, was banged up. He, I don't want to call it banged up, but he was limited in practice. He didn't do much. So do you think this is just a precautionary thing, or do you think this is a Cole Strange isn't ready yet, so let's just kind of throw everybody into the fire and see what sticks? Do we, see a little bit of Layden Robinson this week? Like, what are you looking for? What are you keeping your eyes on the interior offensive line on Tuesday during Tuesday's practice?
I do think it'd be encouraging to see Sidy Sow back out there and actually participating, because we did see him. He had the jersey on, but he wasn't really doing much, which was notable because when you saw pictures from earlier, I think it was earlier that week or at the end of last week in practices, one or the other, it was the same setup that we saw where it was Mafi at left guard and Sidy Sow wasn't in the lineup, which makes it feel like he's not participating for a reason that might be health related. If he, like we saw, he was actually there. I will say it's way too early for me to really read into this. I understand that we need to take note of these things because if it continues into the summer and maybe even deeper, then obviously it's an issue. But I don't care if Sidy Sow's not playing when there's no pads on and it's OTAs. Okay, so what? They're going to be rotating guys, and chemistry is big, obviously. But again, there's only so much you can simulate in the trenches when you aren't able to go full speed. So if it is a precautionary thing and they just want to get Antonio Mafi some more opportunities, that's fine. I do want to see, again, Sidy Sow with the starting lineup. I do think you want to have some level of comfort there. But if he's got something that's nicked up and they just say, hey, we do not want to risk it. 'Cause we saw what happened with Cole Strange last year where, he was kind of nicked up and didn't participate at points. And then you have the knee injury and then he misses the entire summer pretty much. So I'm not reading too much into it. I think it is something to, bookmark in your head, keep tabs on it, and we'll monitor the situation. But not something I'm terribly moved by, especially the offensive line, period. If they're working different rotations, I think it's just to see how guys look like in terms of reps, just to see if they can move, left to right, if it's something that looks uncomfortable for them. I don't know. It's just I feel
it's not a red flag. I'm totally with you. This is the.
I feel like I'm rambling just because I feel like we kind of make a big deal out of nothing.
This is the time to do that stuff, and like we only see one practice a week, and so we have to relay our observations and put them in our notebooks and tweet them and do them on these shows. But it's not like it's, oh, they were the starters last week and these are the starters this week. And there's so many different, I mentioned the offensive line combinations 2 or 3 times during our shows last week, but these aren't different offensive line combinations. These are just June football practices. And so, again, we have to do a show today. We have to talk about it today, but it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're quote unquote trying guys out, in different combinations, because they just want to see what they have on the roster's up to 90 people right now. Like, you have to see
89 because Andrew Stuber got cut or waived.
This is true. They are at 89. So you have to see what works best, and this is the time to do it. So they're probably, again, I don't know, but they could be throwing 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, however many guys at guard, at tackle, at center. We saw Antonio Mafi take a bunch of center reps last week. So this is the time to see what you have. It's not oh no, is Michael Jordan going to be the right guard? It's, oh, maybe they're going to give this guy a shot to win a spot. And, whether he's a starter or whether he's a backup, again, this is the time to do it. So they're doing it all the time. We have to report on this stuff. We have to bring it back and, give our observations. But I don't think it's, a cause for concern. The only thing you have to look at is, when is Cole Strange going to be healthy? And that's kind of why they have to do this rotation right now, is because you don't have your City So Cole Strange, quote unquote duo that is going to be, I guess, for certain, because again, So might be banged up and Strange is going to miss the beginning of the year, where it's going to be, Chuks Okorafor and Mike Onwenu. So that's not really a question. And we don't even really use that as an observation because there's no real news around the position. So,
and Ellie Wolf has stressed the fact that they want competition on the offensive line. I think, right. Mike Onwenu, David Andrews, they're not moving. That's pretty obvious. I think at left tackle, they do want Chuks to be the guy, at least early on, because he's proven he can start in the NFL. I feel like it's always under the radar. And I understand the transition's hard, but look what the Browns offense did last year with backups at both of their tackle spots. They lost their top 3 guys. So I think that other than the guys you expect to kind of be there, I think those interior spots, again, other than City So as well, I think he played well enough last year that it warrants him getting as many opportunities as possible. But everybody else, like Nick Leverett, Michael Jordan, Layden Robinson, whoever it is at that right guard spot, if City does stay on the left side, Antonio Mafi, whoever it is, none of those guys have earned a spot. They haven't shown enough in a Patriots uniform to say, hey, these are guys we're pretty confident, that they're going to be the guys. Again, Chuks is the only one of that group who has starting experience in the NFL. It's not a backup or a plug option like Nick Leverett's been, as a guy who truly started and they were not necessarily looking to replace. So again, there's going to be a battle, and I think that's by design. And they knew that this guard spot was going to maybe have a little bit of inconsistencies.
Let's talk about those rookies then, Caden Wallace, Layden Robinson, quickly, because they haven't really been in those starting lineups, just like the wide receivers haven't, which we'll get to. Do you want to see that happen sooner rather than later? Do you think Layden Robinson should get added reps on the inside? Should he be, I guess, the next man up in this interior guard rotation? And do you want to see what Caden Wallace has at left tackle? And I know they're working in there sort of with the backups, but is there any, again, maybe this is trying to make a headline that's not, but is there any cause for concern that maybe Caden Wallace isn't getting enough reps at left tackle with the starters, where, he's kind of, you want that to be your next guy at left tackle?
Not really. I think he's mixing a bit at the left tackle spot with the top, with what looks like the top group. Hasn't been a ton, but I feel like every once in a while you're like, oh, it looks like Caden's in there now. And I think Layden, it's been the same kind of thing, but like we said with the quarterbacks, if Bailey Zappe is going to be over Drake Maye at all, then I'm really not stressed if Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson aren't getting starting reps. Think about how quickly our opinions are going to change once they have one-on-ones. And we actually see these guys going at each other and locking horns. And it's like, oh, Layden Robinson's not letting anybody get by him. Those are the kind of things where, then I would like to see him start getting reps with the starters because he's earned it. I don't know what these offensive line coaches are necessarily looking for on these days outside of purely fundamentals and being like, hey, on this combo, you want to maybe take over faster or whatever it is, things like that. And chemistry there does matter. But again, we're not even going full speed yet. So again, I think with the offensive line, you start with the older guys, just see if they can make sure that things are flowing smoothly. And then these young guys, if they stand out, that's when you start creeping into the starting lineup. But I think they did a good enough job getting depth with Chuks Okorafor, with Nick Leverett, and Michael Jordan, where, you know, especially the guard guys aren't as proven because they haven't ever really been true starters, but they're guys who have NFL experience. And that's something you couldn't say for the interior last year outside of James Ferentz, who couldn't even stay on the field for more than like a drive at a time. So yeah, I'm really indifferent to how many reps the young guys get with the starters, as long as especially Caden Wallace is getting opportunities to work out and get his, you know, fundamentals down on the left side of the line.
A good way to transition to our next topic, because you mentioned you don't care until we put the pads on, until the horn is doing the Tyquan Thornton thing again early in spring practices. So let's talk about the wide receivers, because like we said, Baker were great last week. You know, great catches. Tyquan looks good. His hands look good. Footwork looks improved, what have you. But we've seen this now for three straight springs and 3 straight summers, where before they put the pads on, Tyquan Thornton there, he looks like he's kicking ass. Is this time? Is he going to emerge? Whatever. And then the pads come on and, you know, shoulder hurts, what have you. Like, that's sort of been the tail of the tape for Tyquan Thornton. So first of all, can him and Baker continue their hot streak right now and, you know, get through OTAs and into minicamp with, you know, being sort of the guys in the wide receiver room? And frankly, does it matter? Because we've seen this already. And should we get our hopes up with Tyquan, or is this sort of just, you know, par for the course? This is springtime Tyquan, and then he's going to come in and, frankly, disappoint again. What do you think of that? What do you think of the developments from those two in the wide receiver room?
Well, I will say first, when it comes to receiver reps, I lean more towards the quarterbacks, where still, like I said, I do want Drake Maye to get reps, because this is the time of the year where you do see the quarterback and receiver chemistry kind of start to build, because there are things that you can do and the timing and things like this is when it's going to be at its easiest. Whereas in the trenches, it's almost not relevant because it's completely different what their jobs actually are. So I think we did see Javon Baker get some opportunities with the ones, because he was catching passes from Jacoby Brissett. So whether that was a rotational thing or not, you're seeing that it feels like he's starting to creep up. And I also think there is enough of that battle where Tyquan has looked good, but I think still that X receiver spot is pretty wide open. I think all the receiver spots, frankly, are wide open, considering outside of the slot. I think Demario Douglas is locked in there in 3 receiver sets. But like KJ Osborne is the guy that you default to because he's a veteran and he's had success in the NFL, but you'd like to see Jaylen Polk again kind of take some of his snaps. With Tyquan, I would expect him to continue to play well. Of course, progress isn't linear, and maybe he'll take a step back, and I don't want us to overreact to that either. But, you know, with his speed and with his skill set, this is the time where you want to see him thrive. Javon Baker, it's kind of similar. I think he'll look even better when you really get to see the physicality more when pads do come on. But, I mean, he's such a dominant player that when there's less physicality that is involved, especially from defensive backs, you're going to see him make the kind of plays he made on the ball. Jaylen Polk hasn't really had a ton of chances to shine, and that's due to a bunch of reasons. There's a lot of mouths to feed. There were some practices we've seen where the protection kind of did collapse really quickly, and then obviously that kind of ends the play really fast, because I saw some questions about him. He did have one catch. Do you remember what it was? He had like one pretty impressive play last week. I can't remember what it was.
It's not coming to me off the top of my head, but I know what you're talking about.
But something. You'd like to maybe see him do more, but again, it's so early. You know, other people are catching passes, not a huge deal. But I do hope to see, especially Tyquan, continue to build and emerge, because it's year 3. Like, if Javon Baker has a bad practice, it's not really going to go off in your head as much because that's expected. Whereas with Tyquan, whether it's fair or not, he really needs to step up. Obviously, still has a couple years on his contract, but with a room that's so crowded and has so many guys who can't contribute, he really doesn't have a ton of space to regress. So again, if he has a bad practice, I'm not going to freak out, but it would be discouraging considering, like, you've been around, man. This is when your skill set really shines. You got to stand out consistently and be making plays. Even if he has a drop, whatever, bounce back and show that you can still be resilient and make a play. And I'm sure that they're trying to, and they're trying to find him targets and ways to get involved. So yeah, Tyquan keeps stacking. Hopefully the same happens with Javon Baker, and we see maybe Jaylen Polk starts to take another step as well.
Yeah, the one thing, too, I want to add to the wide receivers before I let you finish off any thoughts with, again, guys like Polk, even Jaheim Bell, who's a tight end, but, you know, we can call him a a offensive skill position and kind of, weapon. I'm going to still be watching for Tyquan on special teams. I think that's huge. I think that is an interesting sort of wrinkle into this whole thing and an interesting way that he can continue to earn himself a roster spot because, and same goes with, depending on if we see them sort of rep their new, kick return. I guess the way they're going to use kick return and kickoff and things like that, Jalen Reagor could earn himself a spot being that sort of, kick return specialist. So, that gunner, a guy who can really show that, his speed is valuable on special teams, then maybe he can find his. So anything else on the other weapons that you're looking for this thing up with defense?
I think you nailed it. Yeah, the special teams. So again, Javon Baker on special teams as well. Going to be interesting to see if he can carve out a role there as well, just to earn himself, more good rapport and or good reputation with the coaching staff. They know that he can do multiple things. That kind of stuff just makes coaches want to get you involved as much as possible because they know you're really putting the work in. And he's a 4th round pick. It's not like Jalen Polk where he doesn't really have to contribute on special teams because he's projected to have a big role. He might be used as a returner. It looks like he's gotten some chances to do that. But especially with Tyquan, if he can make any kind of impact with his speed on special teams, that'd be huge for this team.
All right, before we close out our OTA preview with some thoughts on the Patriots defense, let's listen in to a quick word from our friends at Game Time.
The NBA Finals are finally here, and if I have any chance at all to find tickets to a game, it's probably going to be through Game Time, an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Getting through the Game Time app is super easy, and I really like their user interface. All you have to do is go to the game or event that you want to attend, go through the venue to see where you want to sit relative to the action, then you can actually get a panoramic view of your seat so you'll know exactly what to expect once you get your ticket. Game Time is also great for those weekends where you're not really sure what you want to do with your night because you can just scroll through, look at flash deals, zone deals, or last-minute tickets and find a plan to spend the rest of your day or evening. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
One of your notes before we started this was the cornerback competition, and we talked about that last week as well. And I said before last week's practice session when we were doing our preview that I was going to try and pay attention more to the defense, but I can't keep my eyes off Drake Maye. I can't keep my eyes off the wide receivers. I'm sorry. It's just where it goes. It's hard to do. On the most important side of the football, in my opinion, especially with the number 3. Wasn't paying too much attention to the defense, but I think you have, and I think you have sort of that sort of side of the ball right now than I do. So what are you looking for, especially in terms of the cornerback position, but in general, improvements, things on that side of the ball when we head to practice tomorrow down in Foxborough?
I'd like to see Alex Dawson keep playing some good ball. He flashed a couple times. He had a tip pass in the last practice we saw against Javon Baker that led to an interception for Jalen Hawkins. I think that cornerback group has really been competitive all around. I didn't get to see it, but I know that Isaiah Bolden had a pass breakup. Marco Wilson had some competitive reps as well. And we've been saying that Christian Gonzalez and Jonathan Jones are pretty much penned in to be the starters wherever Jonathan Jones ends up lining up. And you'd like to see especially one of those outside guys emerge because that star slot position for the Patriots secondary, like Miles Bryant got a lot of crap, but that was not an easy spot to play. You have so many responsibilities. There are a lot of adjustments that can happen on the fly where literally it can just be a matter of Kyle Duggar coming down to the box and saying, hey, you take deep, I'm going to be in the slot. Things like that where you have to be really flexible. And Jonathan Jones is the person you'd want to have in that position where he's done all that. He understands the secondary, knows it like the back of his hand. That's a lot easier for him. Whereas Marcus Jones, I think he can emerge in that spot, and I'd like to see him have a strong camp, especially after last year. wasn't really great. You know, you saw him get kind of picked on at times. But even still, I think Jonathan Jones is the best fit for that slot position. And then someone like an Alex Austin or an Isaiah Bolden, guys who've really shown in pretty impressive flashes. If they can show whether it's rotational or one guy just stands out, having that kind of youth and promise on the secondary, but both of them do, and then you kind of move guys around in that flexibility, I think that'd be pretty huge. And that's before we talk about Marcellus Dial, who I didn't see a ton of him, honestly. Again, I was really paying attention to the offense, but it seemed like he had a couple good plays as well. So yeah, I'll be looking to see which of the corners can make plays because it's a really crowded position outside of those top two spots. So anybody who's kind of gaining ground, that's going to be significant as we get deeper into the offseason program and you start seeing guys really start to work in with the top units.
Yeah. I think too that I guess my goal for tomorrow for the defense is frankly paying attention more to that side of the ball, but especially the young guys. You know, you mentioned Dial, but you know, I know what I'm going to get from a Matthew Judon. Like, I know what I'm at least going to get from him. Same with Anthony Jennings and sort of Dietrich Wise, those older veterans, but I don't know about the young guys. So I want to watch those guys in the secondary. You mentioned Alex Austin. Listen to like all those young cornerbacks who have a lot to prove. And it's an interesting room in general because, again, we all have these super high hopes for Christian Gonzalez. I mentioned it too a couple times last week. He's only played 3.5 games in this league. So I guess we shall see what happens there. Any other closing thoughts for tomorrow's OTA before we get out of here and sort of put a bow on this preview?
Just want to see how smooth everything goes. Like, make sure it's a well-oiled machine. Things may not be perfect. Right. Again, this is a coaching staff that's still working things out. They're finding their chemistry and all of that, but I'll probably just be looking out for that, seeing if there's any snags, and if there's anything that we've seen previously that maybe they get a little better on. Like, sometimes one side was moving through drills a little bit faster than the other. So you want to see them kind of be on the same page a little bit. Again, it's OTAs. This is the time where you iron those things out before training camp when truly every single rep matters because the intensity is a little bit higher. But that's about it for me. Just want to see that everything is, operating relatively smoothly.
Totally. I'm with you. Keep stacking those days. Keep progressing. And again, it's super new. This whole thing is insanely new. There's a bunch of reporting that's continued to come out about this. I talked about it last week where and people made a big deal about Super Bowl banners coming down. It's a brand new head coach. Mayo's been doing this for, just under, call it 3 or it's going to be a work in progress. So I am interested to see too, sort of just how those things work out as the offseason goes on. So thanks for tuning in to today's OTA preview. Make sure to check out our friends over at PrizePicks and Game Time, the sponsors for the Patriots Daily Podcast here. Network. We'll be back. I'm sure we'll do some sort of to bring you guys everything we saw, everything we will see tomorrow down in Foxborough. So make sure you tune in and subscribe. It's Press Pass. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Nailed it.